I'm going to record tonight. Okay, cool. All right. Okay. So thank you everybody for being here. We're going to meet this week and next week. Next week will be kind of wrap up time with a couple of things. This week will be very specific. Um, and I don't know if this will take an hour and a half, 30 minutes. I have no idea. I've got 2 hours scheduled. We can do this for however long we need to. And since we have a smaller amount of people, we don't, I was going to I usually do this in groups. Like we'll break up into groups and do what I was going to do tonight. We might not do that tonight. We might just, this will be our group, have a discussion. Um, what I'm basically going to do is with the third assignment, I'm going to use those first probably three questions, and we're going to kind of attack those as a group. So that, because I know I have some people that have already turned something in, which is fine. Um, and if you're here and you've already turned something in, if you want to change it, you can. You can always change anything that you turn in up until the day that it's due, so it's no big deal. I think this particular assignment's not due till the 9th, I believe,
Yes.
um, uh, November 9th. So we can, so you have time to work on that. But um, I do want to talk about these first three. The last two are really more personal for you, so I'm not gonna, we probably won't talk about those as much. But I do want to kind of focus in on those top three and use this time to generate some questions and some answers. I found that to be very, very helpful. One of the reasons I like doing it this way, and this might be my, um, I don't know, maybe this is more my learning style and teaching style. I tend to be more collaborative when it comes to like creating something. For example, if we're talking about, okay, what would a family ministry look like in my church? If there's not already one there, that's creating something out of almost nothing. Now there might be parts of that already there, but how do you even pull those together? And I tend to think that as people, we work better when we collaborate together and kind of think through what that would look like. Some of you might not work that way. Some of you might like to do everything kind of on your own and kind of think of it on your own, and that's okay too. Um, this might stretch you a little bit tonight. But and when if we were meeting in person, I would do this the same. We would do this the same way as now. I've actually never taught this class in person, so I don't even know what that would be like. Mainly because people most of the time are spread out all over the place, so we usually don't have it in person. So okay, one of the things I want to ask before we go too much farther is, in terms of the book, how's everyone finding the book? And I realize that people might be at different places in the book too. What does everyone think so far? I mean, we're like a little over halfway through.
I'm really loving the book.
Good.
There's a lot of personal experience that has gone on this past year in my family,
Mhm.
which has been what has nudged me to start this master's program again. And so I find it very relatable and very informative as to, okay, the therapists are doing this. Now I can see why they're doing this, or why they're not doing this. But I find it's a very good read. It's a very easy read. It's a very relatable read.
Good. Yeah, it was written in the 90s, so that's good to hear.
I
Yeah.
saw that and I was actually very impressed that I mean the information is still very relevant.
Yeah. 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 If you have a good concept, that concept can be good for a long time. Yeah. Good. Anybody else? One of the reasons why I asked too is I do always toy with, different textbook. The hard part is I only teach this class once a year. We teach in the fall, so we haven't really done a ton to change the textbook itself. But there's also not a lot of textbooks um, out there about that address so many different areas at the same time. Okay. Okay. What happened? Stupid thing got in my way. Hang on a sec. Sorry. There we go. Okay. So, does anyone have any questions about anything before we dive in?
No.
Okay. Okay. I haven't gotten a ton of questions from people in this class just in general, which is fine. That's, you don't have to ask, but I want to ask anytime we meet if anybody has any questions. One of the things we talked about the first time we met, and I've talked about this with when I teach this class in general, when we start talking about like family life ministry and what that looks like, the this idea of like therapy comes like counseling and therapy and what that looks like and how that's used or not used, that always comes up. And so I am going to talk about that a little bit tonight too, because that's important. One of the things that's important is to um, if we have um, like lay leaders in positions where they can offer like mentorship or some type of counseling with people, I think that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. At the same time, there's only so far they can go without you finding professional help to come alongside too. I'll give you an example of that. I worked with a church about I don't know, 6 years ago. I actually still work with them a little bit. I'm going to be speaking at this place in January. They started a marriage mentoring program about, I think it must have been, well, it was right before COVID, so maybe 5 years ago, and developed the program. And I kind of helped them with a couple of things, and just we just talked about different, um, basically tiers of, if tiers 1 and 2 are great with the mentors, if we get to tier 3 with certain types of issues, maybe we want to refer out. So I helped them kind of build a referral network, and we kind of worked through all those things. That's just something to kind of think about when we start thinking through what we're going to develop. Um, and so we'll talk about some of those too. So the first thing I want to do tonight, and I've got the assignment here, like the questions here on my screen. What when we start thinking about 3 ways you see yourself using family ministry in the future, um, what I'd love for you guys to be able to talk about is like what would that like family ministry, what does that look like? And I can start just to kind of kick things off. When I was in youth ministry, we were already, this would have been back in the early 2000s. We were already thinking about a couple of things that that I thought were important as in this particular church that I was in. We look at the mid 90s is when youth ministry programs specifically began really kind of organizing themselves and becoming more. That's when like purpose driven type material started coming on board, and strategic planning started coming on board, and we started thinking that way, having a mission and a vision and a value. Those in the mid 90s, that really started happening in youth ministry, and then children's ministry too, and everything kind of blossomed from there. If we think about it that way, by the time the 2000s came along, like for me, I was already thinking about family ministry in my context back then was okay, I'm not just working with this set of 7th through 12th graders. I also have beyond that, like, moms and dads or caregivers or even grandparents or whoever it was. And then also had this group of people that were kind of surrounding us, either volunteering or giving their time in some way. Um, and so I started envisioning it like this is what it would look. It would look like that. Like it would look like all of these people kind of coming together. And so, but see, we're talking now, that's a long time ago. That's 20 years ago. So, that's how it would have looked in my head. What I'd like to know from you guys is what does like ways you see yourself using family ministry now and into the future. Like what does that look like for you? And now I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to use silence as my pal. I'm going to let you guys talk.
I think for me personally, I've seen a lack in family ministry in my church, and so it's really just had my brain doing a lot of thinking. And my church, we have a youth ministry, children's ministry, but as far as um, there being any type of ways to build a relationship, I see that that's really lacking. So maybe the children's ministry puts on like a family picnic once a year, but I mean, apart from that, there's not a lot of opportunities for, um, the church to really develop a relationship with the parents or visiting guests or something like that. But also, I think the book talks about it a little bit as far as, you know, it's important that we use scripture and apply it to our lives and family ministry. But, as a parent of teenagers, I mean, I've said it in my papers, as well, I mean, kids are facing so many different things, that I need some practical application. What specifically can I do about, these certain issues? So I think just having more educational resources for parenting would be extremely beneficial for me. I think I mentioned in the first thing, like my kids are 15, 13, and 10. So, we're in the big middle of all the issues that kids and teens face these days. So I personally would love to see just some more practical ways of helping in parenting, especially coming from a dysfunctional background and childhood. I was not parented in a healthy way. And so, you know, for me, if I wasn't taught that, I'm not teaching that in my own home. So I just think there just seems to be some disconnect, from the parenting point of view, but also from, as the parent myself, but also in how to parent well. So that's just something for me that I would love to see happen.
Okay. What would that look like? Hey, there's no right answer, right? We're just this is literally like we're dreaming. We're just talking.
Yeah. Well, and that's a great question. I mean, I'm live in a very small community, and so um I think just getting people on board with it because I was thinking too, I was reading in the book, parents may have this knowledge, but then actually getting the parents to utilize it is completely different. But I just think in my own life, I'm busy. I've got three kids, and even if they're in one activity, we've got something every night of the week, including church, on Wednesday. So I think finding the time to do it is going to be challenging. But also finding the leadership in my church specifically. Like I said, we're a smaller church, and so that's a barrier for us. Is just
Yeah.
it seems like the same people want to help. But also, I guess I was kind of even thinking too, what what would it take to draw people in? Like what's going to make that attractive? Because as I mentioned in the other call, my own personal walk in therapy is what got me here, wanting to pursue my master's as well. But there was, I had to acknowledge that there's stuff in my life that I wanted to change. But prior to that, as a parent, I mean, I thought I was doing okay and didn't really see the dysfunction. So if that's kind of where my brain went was if parents think they're doing an okay job and they're not aware of the issues, how do you draw people in, if that makes sense?
Yeah. And how do you make people aware of things that they don't want to be aware of?
Right.
Yeah. 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 I don't. You said something too that makes me think. Um, we don't. We don't have a whether we're talking about church or non-church or in school or outside of school or whatever. We don't have an issue with information. We have a lot of information in our world. Any of you right now could go like that question that's asked that we asked that number one question. You could even go to Google or Chat GPT and ask that question and get AI simulated answer. I mean, there's you have the ability right now to find information, plenty of information. I mean, the book is information, right? That's just one source. Even what I'm saying right now is a source of information. The thing that seems to be lacking is an application of whatever that information is. And maybe, Rachel, to your point, like for you, let's say in your church context, that might be very specific, like, you know, your church context and Natasha's church context and my church context. Like they all might be different in terms of like what's the resources that are there and willingness of people to see this. And I mean, all those things, right? Um, and that's why I wanted to talk about this tonight too. That's why this is good to, talk about it because we don't have an information problem for sure. There's lots of information out there. That's another reason why I like the book too. It's got really good information. Um, how do we apply it? Like, what does it look like? So one question you can ask yourself, or this is something that, and this is a therapeutic question I even ask my clients, things like this. Like, how would you know if this, whatever, fill in the blank, how would you know if this is successful? Or how would you know if this is working? Right? That changes everything from, I got a problem I need to solve, which is not necessarily bad, to I'm generating solutions to something, and I'm on the lookout for ways in which this could work. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Therapeutically, that's a solution focused type question. And I have always found solution focused techniques to be very helpful in church context in a lot of ways. So, Rachel, that's good. That's a good. That's good. That's good. Anybody else?
For me, and can y'all hear me?
Yep.
Okay. For me, I thought about kind of bringing it in, tying it in with my women's ministry. I have a women's ministry at church, been over it for probably about 10 or 12 years. And I find myself always in a situation where I have women from all ages, all, from as young as 16 years old who are newly moms, they've had their babies young, and all the way up to 60 years old. And so I thought about, we do a little of the family life, try to incorporate it a little bit, but I would like to see with my church, I would like to see implementing it even more because I took the book to my pastor and I was trying to share it with him and everything that I don't see a lot of it. And I would like, instead of us being separated, because we have all these different ministries, I would like to kind of incorporate it in with the whole church body and stuff. So he asked me how did I think that would look.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I've been writing down some notes and I'm supposed to give it to him before the first of the year. And I
Yeah.
also kind of shared some things that we were talking about in the class.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's a great question. You bring up something else for
Mhm.
you. What does family look like?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
for that women's ministry, family might look like something different than we would say traditional, like a traditional, type of family, right? It's still family,
Yes. Yes.
right? And so
Yes.
how would we even define family? And
Yes.
that, and
Definitely.
that might be different too. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense what I'm saying?
Yes, and then too, I know that all the women know that I'm a school counselor, so they kind of come to me and ask me
Right.
a lot. And I sometimes I don't know all the answers. I just trust God that He'll give me what I need to know at that point, or either I'll say I don't know, but I will research it. And or
Yeah.
maybe we can research it together. But
Hmm.
I just I feel that there's a need, definitely.
Yeah. What do you feel is the need?
Um, like I said, bringing us all together, doing things because I guess as I kind of tried to look through some of those questions, I was like, you know, bringing us together, implementing things where we're all one kind of like one group or whatever, instead of, like I said, just doing it all separate. And like she said earlier about, we're about scripture and everything, but how do we make sure, because we're a family as brothers and sisters in Christ, but how do we do a little bit more? I just see a little lack in that area.
So,
Yeah.
so one thing, and Rachel, I would have asked you the same question. One thing that maybe to think about would be whatever the ideas you have, like whatever you're thinking about,
Mhm.
like in this case, bringing everyone together.
Yes.
What is so important about that to you? That would be important to
Yeah.
flesh out.
Well, as far as it being important, and I know that we have to, we don't want the children in the same group with the women sometimes, but I just know that sometimes I feel like we need everybody to be a part of of church. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of times I'll see we'll separate children's church, or we'll separate the boys, or we'll separate the girls. And I'm like, let's give us a time together. Like I thought about last week, Halloween. We had the heaven and hell party. We were all together, working together as a team. And I just thought it was a different situation than it normally is. It brought
Right.
us all together. And so I guess that's where I'm coming from. I want us to all to be together sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes.
So for you, togetherness is a driving
Force. Yeah.
force, an idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because what I heard Rachel saying was like parenting, for example, like was it like the idea like parenting in this, like in particular in the world we live in is a driving,
Hmm.
like a driving force.
Yeah. Yeah. I just don't feel like we do enough of it.
Yeah. Okay.
I would say for me, why it's important is because I was a product of a dysfunctional household, and my goal would be to equip parents to not have to be in that position to carry that on with their children, to be able to stop that and to create godly, healthy families.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
Yeah. Gotcha. Good. Okay. Thank y'all for letting me kind of ask you a little bit about it too. I'm not trying to do therapy. I'm just asking questions.
I'll piggyback on both of those, because what I have in mind is kind of bits and pieces of both of what Rachel and Natasha both said. So I am currently living the dysfunctional family, and I go to a mega church that has a plethora of programs specified for parenting, specified for children's and marriages. However, when you're in the dysfunction, you feel very ostracized in these very specific groups, because you have problems, and there's not really a group that is welcoming to those that are really struggling. They say they are, but when you go and you're actually a part of it, it's a completely different story. There's a lack of vulnerability there. And um I have seen the adverse, without getting too personal. I do have three boys, a 16, 14, and 12-year-old. And my 16 attempted suicide in March, and we have been in and out of RTC centers, or residential treatment centers, and inpatients. The last residential treatment center he was in was a faith-based, Christian-based boys ministry academy. The way they took the approach of church was so inclusive to the whole family, realizing that what we were going through was not the problem, but it was just a symptom of a bigger problem, and how to work backwards to figure out what that problem was. and I think that's where a lot of the programs in the church that I go to is missing the mark, because they're saying, okay, you have a marriage issue. Okay, now let's go do this 6-week course on Wednesday nights from 6 to 9, and the kids go in daycare, and then everything will be okay. But you're not really backing it up to figuring out what the root of the problem is, and then including the family in that discussion to really to heal. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
I feel like the family is segregated, like the kids, you want to shield them from the problem, but yet they're living in the problem. And then from the parents aspect, it's almost like you're not supposed to admit that you're a dysfunctional family, and that you're trying to figure out if it can be healed or fixed, or how to work through that. And so what I have found is when you don't fit that path is when you kind of fall off the radar. And so that's from a family ministry standpoint that I would like to see kind of fixed in our church, is when you are truly suffering and you need advice, that you have a place that you can go no matter if you fit the norm or not.
Yeah. So
So
what
for
would
instance,
that,
like so what that, like when we were at the residential treatment center, we did a weekend like family retreat, and it was over the course of 3 days. There were sections that they broke the kids out and they did their own work, and the parents did their own work. Then we would come back and we would share, and then if there was any conflict, then we would have therapists or something help us work through that. But it was kind of a healing journey for each individual person, to where then we could come back and heal together. Where I feel like the church, it's all segregated. It's the kids over here, it's the parents over here. And in that connections weekend that we had, um, there also was we talked about it in the book, the intergenerational
yeah.
uh, family, where they really had us mentoring with, they had alumni parents come in that were older, that would come in and talk to us and spend some hours with us. So there were people that had walked the course ahead of us that could give us some insight, saying, okay, you're in the thick of it and you can't really see right now, past your toes, but we're here to tell you that, take us to few steps forward and you're going to get further ahead, and things there's more things that you can work on. And so really having that intergenerational system in that weekend helped, because we had the kids' opinion, we had ours, then we had mentors that were older, and then we had alumni from students that had been in the program before. So instead of it from, and I know I keep going back to our church, but the
No,
way
you're
they
fine.
break it out is, if we have like a marriage seminar, they keep us all kind of age grouped together, and the kids aren't involved. So um I just see that lacking.
So, um, okay. If you guys don't mind, I'm going to talk about a couple things really fast that I think are important with what you're saying. In the 60s, psychiatrists were really frustrated with the lack of therapeutic help they could give certain people, certain types of clients. And what they discovered was that maybe if they were to talk to these clients, let's say they were working with kids or teenagers, let's just say, they would talk to their parents or their caregivers and then include them in the sessions. They discovered that they would not only help them, but they would start to find out what was like things that were happening. Certain interactions in a family that happened were causing certain problems. Not the people, the individuals necessarily, but the actual, like how people were interacting with each other, how people communicate, how people either verbally or non-verbally acknowledge each other, that type thing. as that began to develop, it became family ministry, or I'm sorry, family therapy. So the first family therapy models came out of that. And they also realized that there were also theories that would support this idea. One being what was called back then, but still around, is general systems theory. And general systems theory is a physics theory that's been around for a long time that says that parts of a whole affect the whole. So if you change a part, other parts will be affected as well. And they use that theory to develop family systems theory. So out of family systems theory, which in mental health world is not very old, like from the 60s and 70s, that's not really that old, but that's how long it's been around. And then the early 80s, it really caught on. And so, like if any of you have ever had Dr. Hubbard, let's say, in one of his classes, he was one of the first people to really use that to start studying families and couples, and he still uses it now. Like in the assessment class that I teach, we talk about family systems theory and the usefulness that it has. If you were going into marriage and family therapy to be a therapist, the basis of marriage and family therapy is systems theory. So Christina, it's exactly what Natasha, you're talking about it too. It's exactly what you guys are talking about. It is, why would we pull the parts off over here, try to fix this part, and not think that this part's going to be affected? They're both going to be affected. For example, if you work with, let's say with a couple, let's say that you're working with a couple and whatever's going on with them, if this person starts to make changes, whatever those are, it's going to automatically affect this person. Not because this person is going to mirror what's happening. The interaction between them is going to start changing, like how you actually interact with each other. So one concept of systems theory is that you don't necessarily always have to change the individuals per se, but if you can change the interaction between them, you can change both parts. Like with the couple, when I work with a couple, the first thing I do is see how they listen to each other. If you can help people listen to each other better, that's something that happens between them. You change them. Like that interaction. Does that make sense what I'm saying? It's not about being perfect. It's just, so to your point, we all live in systems. All of us live in a system, right? All of our families are a system. Our broader world is a system. The churches we live in are systems. Inside those systems are other systems. We all live within them, and they all impact each other. So what you're describing, Christina, is actually a concept of, well, why would we fix or try to fix, like with your son, we're going to make him round. We're going to try to put him back in a square hole. It doesn't work. Why don't we take the whole system and try to help the whole system become a little more healthy? Not perfect, just more healthy. Does that make sense? So and the book talks about this too, like these concepts that I'm talking about. The book will talk about some of these things, but the things that you guys are talking about right now, that comes right out of systems thinking. And there's actually quite a bit written about this, and there's actually quite a bit written about it in the church world too, because it's something that can be used. The issue is that, and it's the second question we're going to address, there's always going to be roadblocks to ideas that we have. Like there's always going to be ways that we run up against changes. For example, each of you have basically kind of mentioned bringing generations together. Let's say we brought generations together for certain things. Yeah, if it's a party, yeah, that sounds awesome. If it's something more serious, that's when we start going, oh, that makes me uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable talking about these things with these groups present. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Which is that's what you're, I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but that would be a roadblock too. I'm assuming when you went to this treatment center, they had a lot less hesitation to have open discussions.
Right. No, because everybody had some experience with the treatment center or with a loved one needing a treatment
Yeah.
center. So there was some commonality in that. And I'll apologize if I got off on a tangent and
Mm-mm. No. No. I don't think you did. This is what I was saying earlier. Everybody here is going to have a little bit different answer for this question. That's by design. We're not going to have the same answer because it doesn't fit everybody's like ideas or concept or even the context that you're in. That's okay. You didn't get off. I mean, I thought what you were saying is right on what we're talking about. Sounds like to me.
Um, I was thinking, um, family ministry. At my church, we have small groups as well. Um, and it's different subjects, whether personal or like family or marriages, whether it's a book or motherhood but within the group, like I've did a book with ladies, and I have a passion to counsel ladies and girls. Um, and so within that, we got to know each other, what we do and, how long you've been and just talk about our personal lives. And I think it comes to networking. So the church as a whole, the church that not the ones who come, not people who come casually, but those who are members and they serve on a regular basis. And so you're talking to someone, they're like, oh, hey, I'm in nursing, I want to go to nursing school. And they're like, oh, well, so and so is a nurse. And yeah, so and so is this kind of nurse, or so and so works that. And so it's networking, but it's family ministry within the church. And then um, it also targets each family member within a small group. So it's not from the pastors, hey, we're going to make this group, but it's people who are members and you want to start a small group, whether that be a hobby that you enjoy, a book. Some people did finances, some people did, a couple did gun um, control or gun lesson, but it's for members within the church. Um, Also in family, in volunteering, I volunteer in a prayer line for Billy Graham, a prayer line. And so I meet and I talk to a lot of people. Just my interaction and my life experience, um, sharing the gospel with those who don't know Christ as well as those who do, um, is family ministry as well because they feel like you're helping them, but at the same time, I don't think that they know that they're helping me as well. Because ministry as a whole feeds the person who's actually in the ministry themselves. So that I love that part about it. I love ministry in itself.
Yeah.
Um, I think I wrote all of that down.
And I think again, what I think is important is that every one of you keep your own, like your idea of this family ministry, what that looks like. It doesn't have to be the same. There's not one size doesn't fit all. Like
Mhm.
you can do this how you think you need to be doing it. Now, I will say that sometimes when we're, especially like a question like this question is basically kind of like if you had your dream, like if you could just kind of dream up, you know, three things that you're like, hey, I wish I could do that. What I would say is it's great to start with what you're doing now or what you know now or what you think is important now. I think that's
Mhm.
smart. It's also okay to go farther than that, like to think, okay, here's one level. What's two or three more steps? It's okay to think that way too. And that the reason why I say that is because um, I feel like well at the very end of the book of John, um, one of the things that's stated really clearly is that um, more signs and wonders than the ones you've seen are going to
Right.
happen, right?
Mhm.
So, in other words, there's going to be like way more than you could dream. Like Ephesians, one of the great prayers in Ephesians is, you know, you know, God, God's going to create things far beyond what we can imagine or dream or ever think about. Like there's going to be things that we're not going to even think about that are going to happen. So for me, that's always been, I don't know, a freedom to dream. Like obviously there's going to be things that are going to pull us back to reality. But that's not what this question's not a not just a practical question. It's like what are ways I can see myself using, like what's this look like if we could say here's what we want, starting small and starting with the like things I know for sure. I think it's awesome. But don't hinder yourself. Like really kind of think it out and think it through because you never know when that might happen. Does that make sense what I'm saying? I just think it's okay. I think it's okay to think big. I think it's okay to think big. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Okay. All right. Let me shift to the second question because and we kind of talk this one's a kind of an important one too. And I worked inside churches and around churches and worked with some churches and been part of them and both behind the scenes and on the in front and behind and around and everywhere. And churches don't tend to change fast, kind of like the academic world doesn't tend to change fast. Um, and that's good and bad. It just is. There's not a this isn't a it's not a, I'm not trying to condemn anything. I'm just saying this is what happens. Our world's changing all the time. Churches don't change super fast, and that's okay. So we have to think about that. So in thinking about the second question here, describe a barrier to change that you have seen demonstrated in the local church. One of the things that and I can start again just to kind of talk through this. At, at the time that this is so long ago, and this would never happen now because things have changed so much. When I wanted to bring in another youth minister because our group was getting so big, and I wanted to bring someone in for um, just basically to help, and there was so much pushback to it, um, and so one of the barriers was basically um, wasn't really said this way, but this is kind of what was meant. We've never done that before, or we've never done it that way before, so we're not going to do that, right? Like this is not what we've done in the past, so what we've done now is working fine, and so that's kind of that was the barrier was tradition in that case. The barrier was this is what we've always done, kind of thing. And it took me a couple of years to kind of talk through that and kind of figure out ways to make that work or make that happen. But so in that case, like there's barriers, right? There's going to be barriers to change, like things that you're going to come in contact with. So can you guys talk about that a little bit? Like describe some barriers to change you've seen. Like
In my own life, I know when I started counseling because I was trying to figure out how can I minister and the way God is using me. And at first I thought, okay, well, it was teaching. And then the Spirit was like, no, that's not it. And so when I finally picked, okay, counseling, then there was this peace. Um, I know my pastor now, all my pastors in my life have looked like me. He doesn't. There's a church up the street from me. When we moved to another city in the Metroplex, um, it's up the street. I was going back to Dallas, like 45 minutes from where I live now, to another city. And it was for probably over a year and a half. And then when I finally started, say, I'm getting my master's in counseling, God said, okay, visit this church. Because I grew up in Black churches. This church is multicultural, generational, racial. And realizing, because pastor, when he gets up, he preaches a lot. Some people aren't comfortable with evangelizing to other people who don't look like them. And that's a shame, because everybody has a soul. But it's something that we deal with in life. Like, even in church, people don't preach about what's going on in the world. But in Romans, it says, be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by renewing of your mind. Like, we have to learn how to live with the Spirit, the Holy Ghost, in the world that is temporary. And so a lot of churches aren't comfortable with preaching about what's going on now within the church, because these are real issues. Like, God's children who are filled with his Spirit need to learn how to live outside in that world today. And so that was another issue. And I believe that's what I put. Because it is really big. And then I see it there. I mean, I love the church and I enjoy the church, and I see why God brought me there. But it can be sad when people aren't used to witnessing to other people who look like them.
Right.
So yeah.
Yep. Diversity can be a strength, but it could be seen as a weakness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then you come to meet people who, I mean, I love it. You meet a lot of people, different kind of people, and it's just real. It's ministry. It's real. I mean, it's encouraging, and it grows you. It grows you. If you're in ministry, it gives you growth. I don't know if people may understand what I'm saying, but it grows you spiritually, it grows you mentally, it grows you emotionally, because I don't want to say levels, because people start measuring each other, but the Bible says that we go from glory to glory. There's always something in someone else that you haven't experienced or lived. And it's like a testimony. They can help you. And then, too, not just racial, but in age wise. Sometimes people older don't think people younger could help them. And sometimes the young people don't think that the older people know anything, but you'd be surprised. So I guess that's why we need to, just move in the spirit. It's good when people are spirit led.
So I totally agree with what you're saying, and I think what you're saying is really good. I'm gonna I'm gonna push on you a little bit and push on us a little bit, because what you're saying is right. I don't think anything you're saying is wrong. There's also, and I think you kind of mentioned this too. One reason why it's hard for diverse peoples to interact, whether it's generational or age or gender, ethnicity, belief systems. One of the reasons it's hard is not because we're humans, it's because we have stereotypical thoughts that we've grown up with, or we're taught, or we've learned, or we've taken on, or we have experience with. And one reason that it's hard to have some, like, say, intergenerational conversations, or interracial conversations, even, or interfaith conversations, is because we often enter these conversations from a defensive stance to begin with, instead of a stance of trying to learn, like trying to learn. So taking a curious stance to somebody that's different than you, that has a different experience than you, that has different beliefs than you, um, you have a better shot than when you come in with your own beliefs and you're wanting to tell them what your beliefs are, or what you think they should do, or who they think you think they should be, kind of thing. Which is what a lot of us do. And I say us. I've done this. This is something I've had to learn in a lot of ways. And so I want to push on everyone to think through. Crystal, what you're saying is right. I totally agree with you. I think one reason why it's good to try and get out of our comfort zones to a certain extent is so that we learn that we can have conversations with people that we might not agree with, or we might not have the same set of beliefs. Even in the Christian world, might not have the same set of beliefs, but it's okay. And we can even have disagreements, and that's okay. And then after the disagreement, we can go get ice cream at Dairy Queen. Like, it's okay. Like, these things are okay. And like, I'll give it a biblical example. Um, Peter and Paul did not get along. They were not fans of each other. They spent a lot of time apart, even though they knew they had the same mission. There were many times where they would go separate places on purpose. Now, they had a little bit different callings too. I mean, they had different roles in the new church too. I mean, Peter really um, was speaking mainly to the you know the 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 mainly Jewish folks, and Paul was really kind of outside of that, even though they kind of talked across sections of people. But they didn't get along with each other. But they were doing the same thing, going about the same thing, and they found a way to make that work. I think one thing that we forget about as people, especially in church, is that we don't always get along with each other. Not, it's okay. There's plenty of examples of people. Um, Jesus took Judas for 3 years. He knew what he was going to do. He had him around him for 3 years. He was around this guy, and he knew what was going to happen, and he did it anyway. He took all these people, these fishermen, these tax collector, I mean, all these different walks of life, knowing they had very different view. They all wanted to do something different, and they all wanted him to do something different all the time. Like, they had different views of like whatever, they had an opinion about everything, and he took all of them on purpose. And that just means we have to think that it's okay that we can disagree with each other, or live in times where we don't always agree on every single thing. That's okay. I think that's okay. I hope this makes sense. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is I want to push on us a little bit to go to think, hey, it's okay that we don't all have the same idea or think about it the same way, but how can we still come together? Like, what's that still look like? Because a barrier to change in church, 100% is right now in our world right now is what I call the Facebook problem. In Facebook, everybody's got an opinion about everything. And that's in church too. If you don't believe it, just ask any pastor that brings up any kind of idea that's really a benign idea, and let them tell you how many opinions they get about how they should do that or not do that, or that's a dumb idea, or this should change. And it could be something stupid. Like, I think we're gonna move this chair from this side of the room to this side of the room. And there'll be like 10 opinions about it. That's where we are. Does that make sense what I'm saying? So those are barriers too, right? Like, these are just kind of things that we are all dealing with for sure.
I would like to add something if I can,
Yeah, yeah.
just so I don't feel like I'm just sitting here and spying on you guys. Um, so on that point that you were saying about Peter, and how they didn't get along and all that, something that to think about, in my opinion, is the fact that they all were following the same person based on facts that they could quantify and see consistently from this person. So in a sense, they were following something that they could all be 100% aware. This is here, this is what we want to follow, right? And that could overcome a lot of their differences, because at the end of the day, even if I'm upset with him, we're all on the same route. We know this is real. Let's go for it. So based on that, one of the obstacles that I see in churches, and I've been in a lot of them through the years, it's very tough to see consistent results or consistent things that we can measure in a church. We do see in many of them a lot of planning, objectives. We want to achieve this. We have this mission, vision, whatever. But at the end of the day, that translates to a Sunday of 2 hours roughly, and one family meeting a year, maybe, for a weekend. After that, we don't call each other anymore. We don't talk to each other. When someone is struggling, we may say, whatever you need, I'm here for you. But you don't follow up on that because you're not really there for them. I always find funny thinking about when people say like, hey, I'm sorry you lost someone or whatnot. I'm here for whatever you need. I always think in my head, they should call the bluff and be like, you know what? I need my house painted on the weekend. Can you come stop by?
Right.
Just to see their reaction. Because that's what we get. And again, I've been in a lot of churches, and probably two of them had a little bit of that, but the rest, nothing at all. So when you come in, you don't feel welcome, but it's based on the fact that if you're new to the church, you're trying to grow your faith, which by definition is believing on something that you cannot scientifically quantify at the time. But now I have to build that faith, seeing that the people that are living that faith supposedly are not living up to the standard. You know what I'm trying to say? So I think that's a major obstacle. I'm sorry if I'm saying something that it's uncomfortable for some. I don't mean to. It's just my experience on what I've seen.
Well, I don't think you're saying anything that's not right. I mean, you're not saying anything that's. I think the barrier, one of the things that we're all talking about, we've kind of talked about it a little bit. One barrier is that comfort becomes a barrier to us. When we get comfortable, that's when we stop growing. And that's not just like I've been in the world of psychology now for a long time. That's not just a psychological principle, that's a spiritual principle as well. If we become comfortable, we won't grow. We have to become a little bit uncomfortable in order to grow. And I would even argue that God created our brain that way. I don't think we like that necessarily. Like we don't like, for example, if we think about the concept of wisdom, I talk about this in my lifespan class. The concept of wisdom, which Solomon said when I was at my mother's knee and my father's lap, they taught me to gain wisdom. They said, above all else, this is David, his father, saying, whatever you do, get wisdom. When God asked Solomon, you can have anything you want, what did he ask for? He asked for wisdom. Now that's a large concept, massive concept, right? In the book of Ecclesiastes, he's basically saying, hey, I've done everything, I've seen it all. Of all those things are worthless except for these things. Like these things are important. Wisdom is one of those. And here's the kicker of it. One way, not the only way, but one way we gain wisdom is through making mistakes. And the only way to make mistakes is to be uncomfortable and try things or do things or do stuff. that make sense what I'm saying? There's a certain vulnerability, like even like Pedro, this is a good example. All of us have talked today. There's a certain amount of vulnerability. We don't know each other. There's a certain amount of vulnerability we even bring to this class right now, just say, like bringing something up, right? Like saying something that we're thinking, right? And when we try things, do things, push ourselves, we're going to make mistakes, especially if we've never done it before. I don't know about any of you, but when I started riding a bike, I didn't ride it right away. Or when any of us started walking, we didn't get up and walk right away. You know, I mean, we make mistakes, we fall, we make mistakes, and we learn, hopefully. If we don't learn, then that's not wisdom. But if we make mistakes and learn from it and grow, that's wisdom. That's how that works. Does that make sense what I'm saying? So all of these things you guys are saying is totally 100% true. I'm pushing back a little bit just because there's got to be, when we think about barriers, obviously the common ones are, well, our elders or our board or our deacons don't want to do that. I mean, that's going to be a common. People are going to always know that. Are there other things? Well, one of these is kind of what we're talking about now. There's been, you know, years of something done a certain way, or this is the way it always looks, or, you know, or I don't know if I want to put effort into the, you know, there's lots of barriers. Does that make sense? Like everything you guys are saying is good. Let's think about it in terms of not just like, I was obviously those, you know, physical barriers, but like spiritual barriers, you know, psychological barriers. I mean, there's going to be things that are going to push back against us, right? I see it every day. I've worked with people for almost 30 years. Even people that tell me straight up, I want to change this behavior. I want to do this different. Will push, I mean, will change with white knuckle change. They won't change. They'll just grip that old way of behaving until they finally let go. Even though they say, I want to change this, I want to change this. You know, that's just something that happens. Human beings, we want to grow, but we don't always want to do what it takes to grow. Not always. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we'll, you know, we'll do what it takes. All of you are doing it right now, taking a class, talking about this at 8 o'clock on a Wednesday night. That's you saying, hey, this is important to me. So you're all getting an A. So everyone that's not here, no, I'm just kidding. That's a joke. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah.
It does. It does. I just feel like when it's something like this, it shouldn't be up there for debate on whether they're willing to do this to change or not, because there's a higher purpose than themselves. And if the church itself doesn't have the structure to enforce that, to be like, hey, we're probably not being inclusive enough or whatever it is, then people who are trying to get into it, people who are really needing the help, are missing out. Because for the most part, someone who's really deep into trouble is not just openly telling you what's going on. You need to
Without telling
kind
you
of,
anything,
right.
more than
You need
likely.
to be able to get that information from them. But if you're not
Yeah.
engaged with them, if you're not committed to your mission, which unfortunately is the case in most churches that I've seen at least, it's like we're here to help, but you need to open up and tell us. Like imagine you can't pay your rent. You're not gonna be out there saying, hey, I don't have money. But there are signs that you can look for and find
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. So and that is a barrier. Short-sighted thinking is a barrier, right? Like if we don't think through things, can be a barrier. And that goes back to what I was saying at the very beginning. I find that big concepts, especially if there's a change we're suggesting, you know, it can be helpful to have people that we talk to that are that can help us kind of think through what we're like the ideas that we have and have pushback, but also have support. It's good to have both, kind of both things. Is this helpful? Hopefully
Yeah.
for everybody.
I was thinking, because when I had that small group with these ladies, that group ended, like we wouldn't talk anymore.
Mhm.
And so for myself, I wanted to start a small group. And so I got out the boat and started a small group. It was with a book for all ages of women. It was over the summer, and so nobody came. But for myself, I got out the boat and I did it.
Mhm.
I wanted to see, because for me, how the Bible says, treat people the way you would like to be treated, or if you want to change, be the change. And so that's why I did it. Because I wanted to stay connected, with other women, with ladies, because
Mhm.
you do grow, iron sharpens iron, you do grow being connected. So that's what I was thinking about when you said that again. But I'm gonna do the class again, but I'm just gonna move when the Lord tell me to move next time. But it was good for me because I moved. I did the class because I wanted to, more connection. But I can see what he's talking about. I mean, it is true, but at the same time, another thing I was thinking about, we have to speak up because we can't assume that people are reading our minds. But at the same time, for some reason, I was thinking you can help a person to the point you can hurt them, and it doesn't help them.
Yes. Let me talk about that because this goes back. I mentioned earlier. I do want to incorporate some clinical thought into, like, in terms of like counseling into what we're talking about now. And I think this is a kind of this gets to be a gray area to me when we want to help people. Are we equipped to help them? And when does helping them start hurting them? In other words, and I'm going to give you an example that this doesn't have anything to do with you guys here. I'm going to give you an example of situations that I've seen that in the like in the cases of when I've worked with couples that I've gotten referrals from a church. Most of the time, that couple started with a pastor or someone. They started with someone, talked to them, and kind of worked with them. And 9 times out of 10, that pastor had contacted me or had them contact me, and we made that transition. It wasn't a big deal. But that 1% of the time, maybe that pastor or someone really wanted to help this couple, and so they really tried their best, but it ended up making it worse because they weren't really addressing like what was actually happening, and they were taking a very narrow approach to what was happening, what was going on. And that goes back to we have to know what our strengths are. Even me as a therapist, I'm not good at therapy with every disorder or situation or issue. I'm not. I know where I know where I'm great, where I can work and help people, and I know where I need to refer. I need to find someone else to help. And so, in terms of um, thinking through, like, okay, we're gonna really try to help people in a family ministry context. One way that we want to try to help them is creating a good referral list of providers for the ministry, for our church, for just having a good list of people that we know can work in whatever these situations are, whatever the issue is that comes up. We want to have that ready because inevitably someone's going to come to us that is going to be dealing with an issue that we're not ready to deal with. And I'll just be very upfront and very open and honest. One issue the church does not do a good job with is any kind of abuse. The church does not do a good job with that, and it hasn't traditionally in the past. And I'm not necessarily like blaming church for that or anything. I'm just saying that is a very specific skill set of people that are trained specifically to deal with that. Any kind of abuse. Like that would be a really clear example. But then an unclear example are people that are really struggling with, really deep depression that they don't seem like they're depressed. They don't seem like anything's wrong. They seem like everything's okay. Pedro mentioned this earlier. Like a lot of times people don't ask for help because they don't want to see like they need help. And that's true for people that struggle with depression, especially. It doesn't always, it's in church. We don't go into church every Sunday or Wednesday and act depressed necessarily. We're, how are you doing? I'm great. What's good? I'm doing good. It's not, I'm really struggling right now. I don't really want to be here and I'm really having a hard time. That doesn't happen as much. So that would be one that, again, those are just ones that are, you don't always see. I'm bringing this up because I think this is important to talk about in context of what we're creating. And I would say that for any ministry, like any ministry that someone's creating. I had a really good psychology professor long time ago. I took a class in my undergraduate, and this was a mandatory class for youth training in youth ministry. We had to take a class in psychology, but also in counseling. And he said something that stuck with me. This was 30 years ago, almost 30 years. Yeah, 30 years now. He said, it's not our job to make personal decisions for people. Like I don't make personal decisions for someone. Now we can walk with people. We can be there to help them. We can make suggestions or ask questions or support, but it's not our job to make decisions for people. And at the time, that sounded like awesome. That sounds so eye-opening. I love that. When it comes down to it, it's really hard not to make decisions for people. That's a really difficult concept, especially in church. It's very difficult. It's very, very difficult. You can do it, but it doesn't really mean it's going to help them. I mean, we all know plenty of people that were like, if you would just change this and not do this anymore, these things won't happen anymore. But until they figure that out, and what I've learned in ministry and working with people clinically is that it does take a certain skill set to help them see that what they're doing is maybe not working and help them change or decide to change and do something different. Does that make sense? Hopefully.
Yes, sir. And Mr. Bernard,
Yeah.
while you were talking, I was thinking another reason why we should go to church on a regular basis and attend and and serve and be around, because the Bible does say, do not forsake to assemble yourselves. The gifts of the Spirit, discernment, people can pick up. Other people have gifts and they can pick up, and a lot of people are moving in the Spirit. So, I mean, this is, a Christian school, and we are talking, ministry is spiritual. And so going to church on a regular basis and being around people, God will give people, you'll come into people's spirits and people will come to you when God tells them to, to speak, the gift of discernment or a word of wisdom or something. And so that's what I was thinking about too. So it's good to go to church on a regular basis and be around God's people.
Yeah, and to piggyback on what you're saying, if you read scripture when God talks about gifts of the Spirit or gifts in general, Romans, Ephesians, thinking of Corinthians, he talks about it in one chapter. The very next chapter is always about love and relationships. So those gifts, like he says, I can have the gift of tongues, but if I don't have a relationship and I don't have love, then it doesn't matter. What I'm saying is a resounding gong. If we don't have a relationship with people, It doesn't matter. There's a saying in clinical spaces, and I've heard it in churches too. Rules without relationship lead to rebellion. And if we think about it in human development terms, what that means is, as a kid goes from 10 to 15 to 18, you can't say to them, this is what you can't do XYZ anymore, or I'm putting this boundary on you. At 10, they might say, okay. At 15, they're definitely going to push back. At 18, they're going to do whatever they want. At 15, they want to start knowing why that's a rule. And if the answer is because I said so, then that's not good enough. Because you have to have a relationship with people. The relationship that you have with them enhances the gifts that people have too. And so, Crystal, I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Having the relationship with people is really what enhances the gifts that people have, and that allows us to even see those gifts to begin with.
Yeah, I understand, because you have to trust the person.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to trust them.
Absolutely. Yep. Okay. Any other comments about any of these two? I'm going to let you guys kind of answer these last three on your own. And I want this class to be something to kind of help you kind of think through these for yourself, but also kind of hopefully we can talk about it. And then, like I said, this particular assignment's not about like a right or wrong answer. In essence, everyone's going to get 100 if you do it. It's not, the points aren't, the grade doesn't matter. What matters is what you're thinking through and how you're thinking about it. In the way in which you start thinking about, okay, if I form this, if I start thinking really like I'm applying what I'm learning and I'm thinking, and what would this look like and how would I start fleshing this out? That's what this is for. The very last assignment kind of takes like, okay, I've given you a survey of X amount of people in a congregation, and I've asked you to go through some questions. And basically, I'm going to write a report to my leadership and say, here's what I've seen, and here's what I'm seeing, and here's what I want to develop as a result of that. The reason why that assignment is so important is because it applies the things you've been learning. It also makes you really think through, okay, this is real life. Like, here's some real life things that I can think through. But hopefully it allows you to give some context to the things you're thinking. Everything that everyone has turned in so far to me has been very good and well thought through. And it's different. Everybody's got different thoughts and ideas, and everybody's coming at it from different places. And I think that's good. I think there's nothing wrong with that. Those are good things. This class is a little bit different class in that it's a lot of like thinking through, like I'm going to create something. It's almost like a little bit of philosophy of something, a little bit of theory, a little bit of application. And like everyone here tonight has said, a little bit of like my personal experience. Like these are things I've experienced that I would like to involve in what I'm thinking and what I'm presenting. And that makes sense too. Yeah. Any questions about anything? Well, not anything, but within reason. Rachel, I was going to mention this, Rachel brought this up at the very beginning. When I teach the lifespan development class, one of the things that we talk about in there is parenting in the different spans, like the different stages. Like we start in like toddlerhood and we go all the way through adulthood. And because that's something that class is a lot of people that are going into counseling specifically. And so that's something that all clinicians get asked about is parenting. The number one question I hear now, I was talking about this with a client yesterday. This is crazy. So I've worked with 5 generations of people now, and the question I hear the most over the last probably 10 or 15 years is, I don't want to screw my kids up. Like that's a driving thought. And that thought drives us to do some really wacky things too. So, but everything you guys are mentioning, I love that you're using your own personal experience to inform what you're thinking about. I think that's really helpful. I think that can be really good, and expand on it. I think that's really good. And I really appreciate everyone showing up on a Wednesday night. All right. Let's stop there. I'm tired. I don't know about anybody else. I'm tired. Next week, we kind of closing up some stuff. Um, uh, I'm going to have a couple of things we're going to discuss. Because I think this is man, I get my weeks confused. Hang on. This is the 8th week? Yeah, this is the 8th. No. Yeah, this is the 8th week. So we have like the rest of this week and then 2 more weeks of class. So, and that last assignment's not due till the 20th. You can turn those in anytime, but not due till the 20th. Okay. Now you can go do something else. Whatever you want to do. I'm sure you have stuff to do.
Yes.
All right. Hey, it's good to see everyone, and hopefully I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
See ya.
Have a good night, everyone.
Night.